I'd like to say I'm like an all around. I do like whitetail in November. We do our sheep hunts in like August. Then we go starting our goats, moose, caribou, and mountain goats. So we have like a array of animals.
Welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast, inspiring real women with a passion for fishing and the outdoors to go get their adventure on. Now, here's your host, Master Captain Angie Scott.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast. This week, we're heading up north, up to northern British Columbia and Alberta, and we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about hunting, which is something that we haven't talked about here for a little bit, so I'm excited to shift gears and get back into the hunting world. And I have a very special guest with me today. She is a female hunting guide with North River Outfitting, where she works with her family, but I'll let her tell you all about that and how she got into it. And I'm probably going to mispronounce her name. So Miguela Minto, I did my best. Welcome to the podcast.
You did a really great job, Angie. Thanks. So I am a hunting guide in northern British Columbia and northern Alberta, and my family's been outfitting for over 40, I think it's our 45th year actually. And we do like a myriad of lovely things and for a lifestyle between outfitting and trying to juggle the struggles that our industry has. So it's a pleasure to talk about it all today and what it's like to be a woman guide in a very changing world that we're facing.
Awesome. And you've been doing this for a while now. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of go back to your roots. And obviously, it sounds like you grew up in a family where this is just kind of ingrained in what you do. But talk a little bit about the earlier years and then you transitioning to actually starting to guide with your family.
Yeah. So like where am I guiding? Like what I really wanted to do was actually become an architect. Back in 2010, I was given an offer, like pretty much a full ride from one of our family hunters that came up to bow hunt. And he just said, just go to Montana State and you have a job. And I had ultimately, I struggled there because I was like, well, I love going hunting and, spending time with my family. And then I realized, do I want to be the one pulling the trigger or do I want to be the one experiencing the hunt and giving that person the opportunity to guide and like on a guided hunt? And I was like, yeah, I told Jerry, thanks, but I'm going to bow out of this one. And I've never regretted it to this day. Don't get me wrong, working your family can be a little bit of struggle, but when I guess it was 15, I made that decision and I geared my whole life getting out of high school. I'm done. I quit basketball. I quit like all my extracurricular activities and I scheduled my life in school so I could get out in a year earlier. So I bunkered down. I took the basics to get out of school, all high level math, English, socials, but like maybe if I do go to university, I don't want to like pigeonhole myself too bad. And
right.
I just take one science, social, and I got out. I graduated a year early and and then I'm like, oh, well, I got to get my pilot's license. And then so I went to work in Saskatchewan for a while, learning airplanes and got my license there. And, just my parents were slowly like mentoring me to get where I needed to be, where I am today. So I'm very grateful for the hard work they put into me because I'm definitely a stubborn child. If I say I'm going to do something, definitely going to do it. So.
Yeah.
So that was that. And then when I started getting into the shows seasons, and it was a different world, you start, you're not like this like little homeschool kid anymore where you're like have to like, you don't know anything about the industry besides what you know. So when I started to go out and meet people in the outfitting and hunting industry, I never really saw myself different. I was like, well, I'm just a hunting guy. This is what I do. Doesn't everybody else do this? Mm-hmm. And over the years, I've realized, hey, Mig, you are a little bit special. Like, I'm not patting myself on the back and telling me I'm special. I just never really bow down to like, well, I'm a female, I'm special attitude. Like, and it's kind of what I mean is like, I didn't go out thinking I needed special clothes or I needed special gear. I just, this is what everybody else was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just did it. And then, now that there is clothing out there for women, I was like, so this last year I tried on some Azire gear and I'm like, this stuff feels like butter. I'm like, this is what women clothing feels like. And then I've also tried some other women's stuff, like, and every woman brand is slightly different. I'm not a skinny girl, but I ain't a big girl, but I'm big enough where I know like I need to stretch in my pants.
Right.
And when I realized, wow, like it's kind of nice to feel a little special,
yeah,
where things are kind of built for you. And so I just over the years, last I guess 2 years, I really like realized like, well, it's good to be a feminine individual in a masculine industry because you really do distinguish yourself between a male guide and a female guide. Because I've talked to a few hunters too, and they're like, at first, Meg, when we saw you, it was kind of like, oh, female guide, like kind of attitude, like, what do you know? And then when their hunt's over, they're like, wow, like we were surprised. We didn't expect that kind of service. I'm like, what? Don't every guide like this? And they're like, no. So it was kind of like an eye opener when you start realizing being a female has an advantage. Don't get me wrong, I can't lift as strong and I can't hike as fast, but what I can provide as a woman in this industry is compassion and a heart to serve, which is definitely noticeable by the hunters and my industry. Like when you go to the guide meetings, whether it's in Alberta or BC, as a woman, you see other women guides and you got to relate a little bit, like the war stories of what we have in the field, which is nice.
Yeah, it's nice to have a little bit of camaraderie with some other female guides that have probably experienced similar situations, and have somebody you can kind of lean on and hopefully develop friendship with. So as you face challenges, you do have somebody else you can kind of go to and be like, how would you handle this situation, or so forth. So that's awesome. So starting in 2011, and now you're starting to see women's gear coming out. So obviously the women in the industry is kind of starting to grow and get a little more traction. Have you seen personally like growth of more females and female guides?
Yeah, actually I have, like, not just here in Canada, but like around the world, which is it's really nice to see that, whether you're in Tanzania or New Zealand, or Zimbabwe. There was a woman guide about 4 years ago. And Zimbabwe is like the most, what I've heard, I'm not an expert, is the most dangerous country to hunt in the sense of like the animals that you're hunting. You got the dangerous game there. And that's the hardest PH course that anybody can go through, is what I've been told. So when you see a woman and you meet her and you hear that like other guys are saying, well, she's one tough individual, I wouldn't want to mess with her. And it's like, oh, it's admirable men, actually, tough men too, to see how a woman can have strength in our industry too. And they definitely bring a different type of strength. Men have an obvious role in society, but women are bringing their obvious role into a very dominant industry where they're able to still defend themselves, and make those decision calls on the fly when it matters.
So what kind of challenges have you faced as being a female? It sounds like there are maybe some advantages, but surely you've faced some situations or challenges. Talk a little bit about that, and then we'll kind of shift gears and start talking a little bit more about the actual hunting and guiding that you do.
No, that sounds great. So one of my sheep hunters flew in, and my dad was like, yep, here's your guide, and he's taxiing into the shore. And my dad heard in his headset, and he's like, I have a woman guide. And my dad quickly said, just so you know, that's my daughter. He kind of pinholed himself, and
Yeah.
and when he got off the plane, and he was just me. Like, I didn't have any of my packers with me, so he was like, I never saw it as a challenge at first, or something, a barrier that would inhibit me from doing my job. But when I first got him, I'm like, well, you're kind of a dink, like, why you treat me slightly different, like, so, but I didn't treat him any different like any other hunter. And, we worked hard. We got him a wolverine, we got him a sheep, and we got him a goat. And at the end of his hunt, he sat down with my parents and said, hey, I've never had a woman guide before, but she is one of the best guides I have ever seen. And I've hunted around the whole world. And there's obviously something you guys have done right. So I think my parents definitely felt encouraged knowing that they never treated me any differently. I still had to, I don't want to say compete, but just because you were my brother or I was their daughter, like, they still treated us all the same,
Mm-hmm.
which was nice. And then I actually had a woman hunter once, and it was the same thing. And she actually wrote an article about it where she was kind of like, oh, woman guide, like, and then at the end of the hunt, she had the same thing. And, it was really nice to see people's expectations on women guides change.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong, we're not all the same. We all have different benefits and, pros and cons to everybody. But I think the one that really shocked me, that was super evident, it was, again, another sheep hunt. And I was like, I thought I was doing the best job I can for the hunter. He's slightly handicapped. And just the way he, like, talked to me, I was like, this is weird. And then he blew up one day, and I was like, because I said, I don't want to go down here because of X, Y, Z. I think we should just wait for them to come to us. He's like, no, we should go. So we went, and then by the time we got halfway through it, he, like, dog cussed me kind of attitude. And I'm thinking, he's like, when you're my age, you'll know how I feel. I'm like, well, you wanted to come down here.
Yeah.
And, it's like, those are the guys where you just want to keep walking. You're like, I'm setting the pace now. I'm like, I was going to your pace. Now you're going to go my pace.
Yeah.
And at the end of his hunt, again, he kind of, his eyes were open to, like, he definitely had an attitude, an unrealistic expectation for a woman, in literally dropped in the middle of nowhere. So it was definitely a good challenge to see that growing up.
Yeah.
Because I never let it affect me in a negative sense. It definitely helped me grow, which I really appreciated, because I never took it too personally.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, I'm excited to kind of learn a little bit more about the actual hunting and guiding that you do. And you mentioned you got your pilot's license. I mean, is that part of being up there in, a lot of remote areas? Is that just something that guides have to get, or how does all that work?
Oh, it's not a requirement for the job, but it just because my dad's been flying since he's 18, I've really focused my life being just like one day, just like my dad. I wanted to run my own outfit up in Alaska and down in Mexico, and flying this a P-18 and whatever, and landing on gravel bars in the river. And I've heard all these stories of him guiding, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to be like him. And so I really emulated my life towards being as close as I could to my dad. And so I was like, well, I'll start with my pilot's license, and I got my Swiftwater technician course. Just everything needs to be my technician course definitely needs to be updated. I haven't done any Swiftwater stuff in a while, but I just really put myself in the line of fire to make sure I could kind of compete. So when he ever got down, I could drive the jet. If he needed, hey, Meg, I need you to go do this, I was there. He didn't have to ever hesitate on my skills to be reliant, because he is like the kingpin. Everything kind of revolves around him. He's the one who's flying most of the time. He's the one who has to drive the jet boat most of the time. And we're just support, which is really good, because the responsibility he has in where we operate is because it's so remote. We're 120 miles upriver for any roads.
Wow.
We're a 2.5 hour flight from Smithers, or even in Alberta. I can still go haul water, but like he's the one who knows the heartbeat of the camp. He knows how it ticks, and I just want to make sure, and my brothers, that we're there to support him too, the best way we can, and learn to transition to a position where one day, maybe we could be as good as our dad.
Yeah, and keep the family business going, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, so with your outfit, like what type of hunts can people go on? I mean, it sounds like you cover a variety of species. Do you yourself have like a specialty, or do you kind of do a little bit of everything?
I'd like to say I'm like an all around. I do like whitetail in November. We do our sheep hunts in like August. We go starting our goats, moose, caribou, and mountain goats. So we have like a array of animals, and we did grizzly bears before we got shut down. And I'll go with an odd black bear hunt if somebody wants to come up and do it. So we're really like diverse in our industry, or I'll go trapping in the winter, and if anybody wants to come, like definitely fun. It's adventure lifestyle. So we do a little bit of everything, whether it's in Alberta, black bear and whitetails, or moose, caribou, stone sheep, and mountain goat in northern British Columbia. We kind of make sure we're in the heartbeat of what we're doing.
Awesome. So let's just give an example to kind of paint a picture for people listening. So I'm wanting to book a hunt, and whatever it may be, moose, caribou. So people fly in from somewhere, and then where do you kind of go from there?
So like in northern BC, so everybody has to go through the connecting city of Vancouver, this are international, and then you go fly up to Smithers, British Columbia, and then from there we ask everybody to overnight, because the airliners just love us hunters, because someone's bags can be missing. So we just make sure everybody's luggage can catch up with them typically. And then the next day, you get picked up from your hotel and drove back to the airport, where you get on a private charter, and then you fly into our lodge. And then from the lodge, my mom licenses you. One of the guides will get your rifle shot in. You go through your gear, say, hey, you're going goat hunting, you need XYZ. If you're moose caribou hunting, another guy says, hey, you need this and you don't need that kind of attitude. So they go through your backpack, just ensure that you're packing the essentials. And then you grab your lunch, and, you're on another plane getting flown out to your spike camp. And it's a pretty big operation in that little bit of time, where everybody's just getting thrown out into their spike camp for what they're hunting. And then once you're there in your camp with your guide and your packer, whatever the guide has been spotting or where he's going, depending on what you're hunting, he says, okay, we go for a 2-hour hike. And, that's when we're in the bottom of the basin, and we can start spotting billies, or, we're just going to sit here on the lake tonight. And, I've been seeing caribou come down, or moose, so it really depends how the next 10 days will unfold with your guide.
Oh, sounds very, very cool, very adventurous. Want to learn about fishing, hunting, and outdoor gear from fellow experienced outdoor women, as well as get inspired to try something new in the outdoors? Then subscribe to Adventurous, the only women's hunting and fishing magazine. Adventurous is a high-quality print magazine that receives rave reviews, and it also makes a great gift for other outdoor women and youth. Subscribe at Adventurous Magazine and use code WOMANANGLER for 15% off.
We have this one cabin too on the lake where we get the odd guys that want to come up fishing, I guess, too, and they just kind of like look after themselves in this one cabin, and and it's the funnest thing ever. It sounds silly, but yeah, I took one guy over there, and we tied the dinghy boat tin job and on a creek, and we pushed ourselves out, and we're fly fishing, and we're just catching fish every 3 flies. It's like, wow, this is great.
Wow.
Or the little fountain rapids we have there. Like, it's really different. Like, it's whatever the guide and what you're hunting or fishing. It really depends on yourself and how much you want to have fun or experience.
Very cool. Well, let's shift gears again and talk about some of the challenges, both just in the industry and perception and whatnot, and then also maybe some of the government and kind of environmental challenges that have been popping up lately. Just it's some listeners may not be aware. I'd love to hear your perspective on some of the things going on currently in the hunting industry.
Yeah, it's kind of if you look back even 100 years to where we are here today and see the challenges that we're facing, it's kind of like pretty diverse. So before, it was a lifestyle, that people really lived and experienced. And now today, it's kind of like a job for some people, depending on their outfit. And then, so when you go to the guide meetings and then you see like the government, how they treat us, it's like, why do you keep lying to us? Like, we're in the field, we're seeing the wildlife population, and we're experiencing the challenges that other industries come in and affect, change, disturbing the footprint. So I get frustrated when I go down to these meetings and I hear these lies because I know the truth. So then this truth that the government paints, the uneducated that don't like hunting, blame us for the environmental factors that we're facing. Well, it's hunting the reason why we don't have any caribou. It's hunting why all the grizzly bears are gone. It's hunting's fault why this and that. It's like, whoa, pump the brakes. If you want to put a pen to paper, let's talk about the challenges that mining has and logging and oil and gas. Like, you enjoy your cell phone and taking trips around the world and doing all these other things just like everybody else. But there's some sort of factor that you have to take into consideration is the footprint in which everybody has in the environment that we love and enjoy. So, when our government tells us we have a caribou problem and they blame it on overhunting, it's like, it's not overhunting. It's you flying helicopters in to remote access places where, they're breeding grounds for these animals. So it stresses these cows out. So yeah, they're calving out, but they're not producing the milk they need, and I'm not pointing my finger at these industries because, everybody has an effect in it, but it's like even recreationalists with their snow machines, they're going up into parts of the mountains where caribou are and they're making tracks. The wolves are going to run on those tracks, or the oil and gas, they're cutting the seismic lines in and they're opening up country. And guess what's going to move in? Like moose are going to start coming in, deer are going to start coming in, and elk are going to start coming in too. And, displace all the other existing wildlife that used to live there. And wolves begin coming up. And so I think we definitely need to learn to manage it. Everybody has to have their neck in the game, not just outfitters that are doing, predator management, ensuring that their hunters have the license to take a wolf. It's just everybody and it's hard to get everybody on the same page because our government wants to take our land away from us. You see the issues up in Alaska. They're coming in here in Canada with this 2030 agenda that they have. And they're just trying to keep everybody non-educated on who's in the land and who gets to use it. And I don't care what anybody says. Everybody has an invested interest in our wildlife, the plant life, and and if you're not connected to the realities of where your clothes come from and your fuel, you're gonna have a real hard time understanding where an egg comes from once you talk about agriculture. When you ask somebody, I would eggs, and if you ask them where does your water come from? Oh, the tap. Where does your meat come from? Oh, the fridge or the grocery store. It is really, people are disconnected on where the problems are coming from. The government wants to blame producers of these resources, but the reality is the government mismanaging it so bad. And in the sense of feeding this, I'll say, propaganda to the people who don't understand. Like, it's like, it sounds bad. It sounds like fake news because people are taking out of context because they have no contextual information that back these things. And I'm not saying there's not a problem with like our sea life and our land animals. There is issues, where there's too many wolves and it's affecting the moose population, or there's too many people in the same spot where the government's not listening to those stakeholders in the area and say, hey, like, you need to make the licensing in here different, because there's too many people that have access. We had this issue on the Stikine River. We gave up. We just said, hey, we're not going to hunt the river anymore, and we're going to allow the residents to be there because it's just too many people. When you're seeing like 100 boats in the season go up, you think, okay, there's 100 moose going, and so how can we make a difference? And then, over the years, the government finally saw like, whoa, there's too many moose coming off the Stikine River. They made a change. It's not at least it is a change, and we're working toward a greater change, but they're not catching up as fast as the whole world's changing. And I'm not saying I'm not a green earther and I'm not going to start hugging trees. I'm not that. I'm a realistic person on how we can properly manage our wildlife and the resources that we have, because our government pays for all these biologists to go out and do their research and studies. But when you get all this information back, the government never applies it, it feels like, because the last 10 years of going to their meetings and really listening to them, I'm like, you guys just did a study a few years ago on what helicopters do to mountain goats, and you're still allowing that helicopter traffic going across these very sensitive spots. So what's happening? Like, they're not using the studies to make change. And the perfect example too is the United States. You guys have done such a great job with studies, like for mule deer, and in southern Alberta, they've noticed change in their mule deer. So the outfitters have been telling them for years, take away the doe tags. And now that there's a study on it, I'm praying that our government is going to use your guys' study, because it's finally backed up with paper. The outfitters have been saying for years, get rid of the supplementary doe tag, protect the does so we can have healthy buck populations. And, you're fighting an uphill battle sometimes, but when we're all persistent, and outfitters too, like, because everybody has to be on the same page. We have to leave what we have here better for other generations to come. And it doesn't matter if you're a hunter, a logger, a miner, oil and gas, or just a recreationalist. Our landscape has to be left in a way where it can be used again, for maybe a different purpose. Maybe you've mined out all the gold, say, out of the ground, or precious metals that you're getting. Well, obviously reclamation comes into it, and it turns into a recreational place for recreationalists to enjoy,
Are there agencies in Canada that kind of help lobby and educate the public what's actually happening? Like, are there resources someone could go to learn, or how does that work in Canada?
So every province has their own task force, I'll call it. Like, APOS is our Alberta Professional Outfitters Association. We have a small group of people that go to school, educating them on wildlife. And then British Columbia has Who Cares campaign, and it's about educating people on like wildlife issues and logging and stuff like that. And Who Cares has been around, I think, since 2017. And the real push for Who Cares was because of the grizzly bear shutdown. They're trying to educate people that shutdown wasn't caused by lack of bears. It was caused by a political decision. And because people's political decision has now affected people's way of life. And I'm not talking about people who are hunters only. I'm talking about people who live in remote communities that have bear issues, that, now these bears just have to be dispatched, and there's no economical return on them. They're literally, I'm not saying every bear is, but, when a grizzly bear gets dispatched, they might do a little bit of research on this bear, and there's no skipping that hideout and bringing it into a school to tell kids, like, hey, this is what the issues are, or anything like that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I firsthand experience. We had to dispatch a bear, and because it was acting aggressively, and like, well, I have to, as a guide, I have to make those calls, like life over me going to jail. Like, I was willing to. Because that's how scared I was of the government of making that decision. I'm like, well, I'll go to jail for this if they don't find me guilty. But then I'm thinking, there's human life here. Like, what matters the most? So I made those on the fly decision. Like, hey, like, this is what we have to do. If there's consequences, I'll deal with it. So I reported it, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I told him what happened, and he said, okay, did you take anything of the wildlife? I said, no, I left it there because I wasn't going to touch it until you gave me permission, because, it goes into another category of, like, I don't want to get a ticket. I don't want to lose my job. Like, the fear, like the lack of education I have of what would happen to me, so, and he says, no, it's okay. Like, I'm just glad you reported it. And now we can, like, they're kind of building a case on, like, okay, these grizzly bears are becoming more aggressive, but yet the general public doesn't have that information. And it's kind of sad, because PETA and those big organizations have the money to really promote these issues that, animals are more valuable than humans, and it's kind of sad, because, like, when I thought, like, I thought I'd never have to make that decision in my life. And when I did, I was like, wow, like, I was scared, because I was like, in the sense of, I'm going to lose my career over this. But, human life is more valuable to me, in that situation,
right?
Because obviously that bear, so he had a different idea of what human life was worth.
Oh, absolutely.
But there is organizations out there that do educate, but I think as hunters, it's hard to kind of get that consistency out, because in the outfitting world, because we have a challenge of this government constantly making decisions based on political means versus for the greater good,
Gotcha. Well, yeah, it's like fishing or anything, having to do with the outdoors and the environment. There's always challenges because people are involved. So things happen, and, I'm glad to have you on the show to just kind of talk about that, make people aware of some of the things that they might not be aware of or thinking about. And so it's always important to try to do your research and get the truth and, educate yourself, so that hopefully we can all work together to make positive changes where it needs to be made. So
exactly.
Yeah, thank you for sharing about that, and want to kind of just start wrapping it up here. It's been a ton of fun, just kind of getting some insight from you, but you kind of alluded to what you're working towards, kind of maybe taking over the business down the road at some point. Anything else coming up, or any goals or anything you want to talk about in regards to the future?
But, it's kind of a crazy question to ask, because I never really know what's going to happen.
None of us really do, right?
Yeah. At this time, I'm just looking forward to having a very successful season, and, allowing people to come up and experience these outfitted hunts where they can take it back and tell their children, and their children tell their children, and it becomes a way of, I guess, advertising for the hunting industry too, where these kids and these other people that they get to share their story with, maybe one day want to come up or experience something for themselves, or research for themselves, and like, whoa, what about Smithers? And, like, maybe they can't afford a guided hunt, but they can afford to come up to northern BC and experience what true wilderness looks like. And if I can just leave a testament to people or a memory in their life where they start questioning like their decisions in life, is working 9 to 5 and always working and not spending time with your family or the outdoors really worth it? If we can make them question that, because I had a hunter come up this last year and he says, I've been working too hard. I'm not really spending time or looking after my body. He's a young guy trying to get ahead in this industry too. And he said, I need to appreciate these moments more. And I'm like, I forget too. Like, I live this, so I take it for granted. So looking forward, I just really hope I can learn to share my life with other people so that they can be inspired to educate themselves in their own area where they are experiencing. I'm blessed to live in Alberta and BC, and we have a lot of wonderful hidden resources, and people come here to experience. And I want to make sure I can say, hey, like, go up to Mass Valley, and go see those hot springs, or go up to northern British Columbia and see like the breathtaking wildlife viewing that you can see in the mountains. And, in Alberta, like, you got wildlife like deer and elk and moose and the water systems there. Like, just, it might not be all as super exciting that Instagram has, but we're a place where you can come up and really just experience but they can take that same sense of adventure in their own backyard, whether you live in Tennessee or Alabama or wherever in the States, and you can see these wonderful things at your own province experiences, and just get involved in your wildlife, whether it's wildlife or hiking club. Just get outside and get that fresh air, really.
That is amazing advice, and I agree with you 100%. So I hope everybody takes that to heart. And if you're interested in traveling and experiencing what we talked about today, you can go check out northriveroutfitting.com. And I guess, looks like all the information to book and get more information is right there on the website. Really great website. So it looks like you also have an email list that people could sign up for to get updates and such. So very cool. Anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to touch on?
Not really. I just really hope people start to opening their eyes to like how wonderful life is. And, working hard is important, but, experiencing it for what it really is. Don't get me wrong. Not everybody's going home, when they go out hunting with a turkey or a deer or a moose or a caribou or, just learning to appreciate the moments within, like what intrinsic value that you can capture, because our days are numbered. We're going to expire one day. And if we can share what we have experienced with other people that inspires the same thing that has in them, I think that's what it's really about too, because life is short, and, working, it's important. I love my job, but, time with family and being outside, whether you're catching something or not, it's important to understand the real expectations.
And being present in the moment too. And I think that's one of the things that being outdoors and doing activities like hunting and fishing really kind of help with, because when you're doing that, that's really what you're focused on. You're not really thinking about, the project that's due on such and such date that you need to be, doing, or, worried about text messages coming in, especially if you're in a remote area where you don't even have service. It's great to unplug and, be present, and everybody should be doing that on a regular basis.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, this has been super fun chatting with you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I hope people go check out North River Outfitting. We'll put a link to that in the show notes for this episode. And I just thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you as well. I really enjoyed being able to share a little bit of my slice of heaven with you and your listeners, so they can experience their own slice at home too and appreciate it.